Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Good evening, folks. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, August 27th, 2020. This is a special board meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education. And Mr. Lanning, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Mrs. France?
Here.
Mrs. Long?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Long?
Here.
And will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have a couple items for discussion and presentation, and we'll start off with the return to school start options. Dr. Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Okay, just the return to school start option. Obviously, we're in our second week of school. Tomorrow will be the end of our second week, so I think we've had a very successful start to the school year. We have, as you well know, 50% of our students attending on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday is a collaboration day. And with the goal of returning on September 8th. That was in the original plan that we had created and had talked about late July board meeting. So that was our reset and restart plan. And so, first of all, I just want to say thank you again. I think I said it last meeting, but thank you again for the team effort between parents, families, students, and then obviously at the school, teachers, staff, nurses, administrators, board, everybody, just a team effort of getting off to a very successful start. I know we get into some cliched phrases when we start talking about this year of unprecedented and once in a year, once in 100 years, and unique and crazy times, and then so we get into those cliches, but really things have gone extremely smoothly these first 2 weeks, and that just didn't happen because by chance. It happened because a lot of people did a lot of hard work and a lot of planning. And so just again, thank you. It is a team effort. As we continue to look towards September 8th as the goal that was in our plan, as you guys well know and everybody knows that things continue to change on a monthly, weekly, daily, minute basis. And so trying to keep up with that information and knowing that even though, the plan that we have, a key piece of there, it's a working document. It's a living document, as we like to say in a history class. It's a living document that it continues to change and change, not over 200 years like something like the Constitution, but over 2 weeks, 4 weeks. It changes over time. So, we did a survey to parents and staff to gather feedback and gather input from our parents and staff on whether we wanted to stay with 100% returning on September 8th. That was the goal that was set in our reset, restart plan. or extend the 50% phase-in. And so those are the two options that were put in there. And obviously, the safety and well-being of our students and staff is a top priority. Gathering this input as the decision-making process. So again, this is a very complex, complicated entire process, and so there's not an easy solution. If there's an easy solution, we would have figured it out about a month ago. So there's no easy solutions out there. We just gather all the information, gather all the data, and we make the best decision that we can possibly make. So as we move on to the next slide, I think we're on the bar graph here. On the bar graph? Good? Okay.
Pie graph.
Pie graph. I said bar graph. Pie graph. Glad I wasn't in that. It's a graph. So like I said, we surveyed staff and we surveyed parents. And so this is the staff survey. We also broke those down by building. And so we asked them whether they wanted to extend the 50% phase-in or whether we wanted to return to school on September 8th. And so the teachers and staff, of about 200 responses, they had 85% said they want to extend the 50% phase-in, and 15% said they wanted to return to school on September 8th. So as we look to the next page here, so we did force them to choose a couple of top reasons, and then we also gave them an opportunity to state another reason. But the two reasons for selecting the September 8th, students coming back, students may fall behind. I feel that my students are safe, and I feel that the staff is safe. So those were the top reasons of returning on September 8th. So obviously, if that was 15% of the staff, those numbers obviously are a little small. And obviously, since 85% wanted to do the 50% phase and continue that, these responses are a little higher. So again, I feel my students are safe. I feel that students are safest with this selection. And I feel that my students can stay on track academically. Okay? So those are the reasons there. And then we look through some responses that the staff gave. And obviously there's many more responses in this, but just to kind of give you the flavor a little bit. So returning 100% on September 8th, why did they choose that? I think it would be difficult to manage remote learning if we're in person learning every day. I'd like to develop more meaningful instruction for those learning days. Here's how adequate time to prepare. We would provide more busy work than authentic instruction. Much I'd love to be back 100%, but I'd hesitate to do that due to distancing protocols. I guess it should be on the other one here. I'm sorry. Difficulty making the virtual lessons and in-class meaningful to pair together. Teaching appears chunky. So continue down to 50% phase-in. Be safest is time to continue with the hybrid model. Best chance to remain in person. But that being said, collaboration on day would be essential for instructors to juggle the demands of the hybrid model. And then also, this is a gradual approach that increases students' time in the classroom, but also allows for a controlled environment beyond with COVID. So again, just to review the options, return on September 8th, or continue with the 50% model of making Wednesday an in-person day with half the students one week and the other half the other week. So that was the two selections that they were given. And then if they didn't like either one of those, they were then given an opportunity to express their own option. As we continue on here, so that's the staff, okay? So that's teachers and support staff. So we continue on here to the parents. So we have parents, and then we have them broken down by building also. So this is all BSS parents. So feedback on return to school on September 8th or extend the 50% phase-in. Almost 60% said return to school on September 8th. And then about 40% said extend the 50% phase-in. So again, purpose was to only survey those parents that were in person. So we did not intend to survey those folks that already have chosen the online option. Because I think that would skew the results a little bit. They've already chosen the online option, so just choosing those people that have selected to return in person. So 59.9 and then 38.9. And we get about 1,700 individual responses. So if a parent, if I had kids in 3 buildings, I had 3 different responses because I might feel differently if my students at Stephen Bell than my students at the high school. So they were allowed to choose them. So this is 1,750 individual responses. And then as we continue on the next slide, Stephen Bell, BCI, the middle school, high school, fairly consistent, relatively speaking, compared to the results overall, obviously. So anywhere from high 50s to 63 or so there. So again, about the same. There wasn't one particular school building that was totally skewed one way or another. They're fairly consistent. And continuing on, the next slide. So again, top reasons for choosing to come back on September 8th. Students may fall behind academically, childcare issues, and I feel that my child is safe in this option. And then for the 50% phase-in, those are the 2 bottom ones there. I feel my child is safest in this option right now at the 50% phase-in. And then also, I feel that my child can stay on pace academically. And so moving on to the next slide, again, anecdotal comments. Again, there were many more than this, obviously. But reason why returning 100% on September 8th, falling behind academically, doesn't retain or learn virtually. Because again, you got to remember that there's 50% of kids here in person. The other 50% are doing remote learning lessons at home on that day, and then vice versa the next day. I think social emotional aspect needs consideration as well as academics. Students maybe fall behind academically. Older kids are more capable of working independently compared to this age group, the smaller kids. If the kids go 50-50, they would be academically behind their peers that have consistent daily lessons online. Also, fully aware of the risks involved and committed to sending our child to 100% learning. So why continue with 50% phase-in? Better chance of better chance of school remaining open and not shutting down again. Think the amount of individual attention teachers can provide this option benefits all children. Less kids equals less chance of getting COVID. Option gives the best of both worlds, reduces risk while maximizing the value of in-person learning. The every other Wednesday needs to be eliminated. Wednesday off would allow completion of assignments in less stressful time frame and maintain consistency. I feel it's important to have face-to-face interaction with teachers and peers. Too much isolation is not good for young person's mental health. I didn't change. I copied and pasted exactly what they said. So then, young persons. So, questions on those before we move along. Move to the next part. All right. We have a special guest with us, Eileen Malice, who is our nurse at Bellbrook Intermediate. And she really has been a part of the whole return to school process. Has been an integral part of that, providing her medical expertise with that whole process, and also obviously working with the other nurses in the district. But very appreciative of all the time and effort and being here tonight.
My pleasure.
All right.
So I just put together just a synopsis of kind of how we got to where we were with coming up with the reopening plan that we did. And just to talk a little bit about, what we found studying over the summer, schools in Europe that opened already and what we've learned from them, what to do, what not to do. So I got that on a presentation, but I wanted to start off with this slide, which I find funny. It just captures how 2020 has gone already. And I know you can't see it, but it's a guy in a suit of armor, and he's getting ready for 2020, and the next part is the arrow going through that tiny little eye spot. And that's kind of how 2020 has been up to this point. I think right now, Bellbrook-Sugarcreek schools, we are that body of armor, and I don't feel like right now that arrow is going to go through our eyes. I think that we've got a solid plan right now. We're continuing to learn and watch the science, follow the science, and continue with that as we move forward. Next slide. So our goal always was to get the schools open and to stay open. That's kind of what our hallmark mission was. We used all available information from the CDC, Ohio Department of Health, Green County Public Health. And as Dr. Kozak mentioned, things are changing as we speak. New mandates are coming forward. They're changing recommendations as far as masks. I can't tell you how many orders came through between the time July started and August 14th, making changes that we adapted with our plan. So over the summer, actually in the spring, right about the time we were deciding not to reopen, schools in Europe were reopening. So I think all school nurses kind of had eyes on them and were following what worked for them and what didn't work. And two of the schools, or two of the countries that kind of stood out were Denmark and Israel. So the next slide I have is kind of a great chart, and it shows what worked and what didn't work, and we are on the far column. So a couple things across the board. It was found, if you are consistent with these few mitigating elements, your chances of success of staying open and limiting the amount of disease that you have in your schools will be minimized. So it starts with community spread. How much community spread do you have in your area? So Denmark, on one hand, had very, very low community spread when they opened. Israel's was declining, but it wasn't low. But they were feeling pretty good about their mitigation efforts in their communities and felt like they were in a good place to move forward and open up their schools. As of today, Bellbrook is at an orange level, level 2, so low, but not the lowest. So we really still need to be quite careful about the COVID that's in our community. I'm using Denmark as the kind of the hallmark for this, but across the board, every successful opening of schools that use social distancing tended to do better than those that didn't. So social distancing across the board seems to be the thing that will keep your school open. So in Israel, they staggered the start of their school for the first 10 days. After that, they lifted that restriction. And within a couple of days, they had hundreds of kids test positive, over 25 staff members test positive, and it just kind of fell apart from there. And within 10 days, or after that, they were closing their schools in Israel. So it just did not work out. And I know some of that had to do with that the community spread was still elevated, but it did not help that they did not have the social distancing in place and did not continue that. Obviously, at Bellbrook, we have continued to have social distancing. We've got visual cues on the floor in every building. Even the young ones seem to be picking up very easily with the social distancing. The learning curve, which we thought would be very good or very great, has not been very, very hard at all for the kids to pick up on. For masks, Denmark did not require masks. Israel did initially, but it wasn't enforced and it wasn't consistent. Obviously, in Ohio, we are mandating masks for all age groups. Small cohorts across the board, everybody had small cohorts that they started to use. Denmark continues to use them. With our 50% hybrid model, that is, we would consider that a cohort. Teachers changing classes instead of students moving in between classes. Groups staying together at recess and for mask breaks, and that's kind of how we're mitigating that. Increased ventilation is another important part. Denmark was in a great position. It was spring. They could have windows open. They had classes outside. Not really sure what the ventilation protocols were for Israel. And then in our buildings here, everyone's a little bit different, but everybody is able to do some form of dilution in their classrooms to dilute the virus. So who could stay open? Denmark, yes. Israel, no. And so far, so good. Bellbrook is doing great. Next slide. So what are the risks? So we know that there's health risks coming back, whether we are at the 50% model or not, and we know the education risks. So those are what we need to make a decision on and balance. As far as the health risks, I think that this research is changing daily, and I really don't think that we are going to know the impacts of coronavirus on our population of children because we are just now getting back to school. But what we know so far is little kids in the elementary buildings tend to do a little bit better in terms of the disease. They're not going to get as severely ill as kids in the middle school and high school. The younger children tend not to, they tend to harbor more of the virus in their bodies, but it's still yet to be determined what impact they have in terms of spreading the disease. We know that we do, or those little kids do, they just don't know how much. The kids that are in the middle school and the high school are basically being treated like adults in terms of how they are spreading the disease, which is easy. Next slide. Let's see, I already talked about that one, so we can move forward. So I have a graph here, which I wish you could see. I don't know if you have access to it, but what we've done is kind of have a little graphic here on what it looks like in a classroom that's at 50%. And what the picture is trying to let you know is that if we have one person in a classroom that's infected with COVID-19, and we maintain our social distancing, we are able to have 6 feet around that person. We continue to wear masks, even though that the people in that classroom are going to be spending more than 15 minutes with that person. The chances of having a close contact and quarantining people in that classroom is severely, severely diminished. And that's at the 50% model. I wish you could see the picture. So what I want to show you on the next slide, but before we do that, I want to make sure that the things that we're doing now at the 50% model to keep ourselves open is the social distancing and reinforcement of hand hygiene, hand sanitizer, hand washing, huge increase in our cleaning and disinfecting of all high-touch areas, mandatory masks for all, self-assessments for students and staff, and having our kids and our staff stay home when they're sick. Now we'll go on to the next one. So this model kind of shows you what would happen if we cannot have 6 feet of social distancing. And it doesn't matter if it's the CDC or Greene County Public Health telling us, anything less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes is considered a close contact with somebody who is infected with COVID. So in this model, where we've kind of got the desks together at a 3-foot distance, we're going to have 10, possibly more students that would be considered close contacts that would need to be quarantined for 14 days. The student that's infected would be out for 10. We have a possibility, just depending on how far apart those corner ones, those orange squares represent probables. Not sure, we kind of have to do some measurement, and the final decision would be up to the Greene County Health Department on if they needed to be quarantined or not. Next slide. And depending on where the placement is of the student that has COVID, if they're closer to the front of the room and we are under 6 feet, it's possible they'll start taking out staff members. So in this particular model, we're only got 7 students that might be considered close contact and quarantine, but we've also taken out a staff member. And what we're not talking about is we're talking about people being tested positive, but we're not talking about how sick these people are going to get. And we don't know that. We don't have a crystal ball and we can point at people and say, you're going to be okay, you're only going to feel bad for 2 days, or you're going to be in the hospital for a month and a half. We don't know that. But that's one of the risks that we're considering when we're changing from the 50% model back to 100%.
Good question here. On the map there, is that masked, unmasked, or is mask a factor at all?
That's a fantastic question. It doesn't matter. Masked or unmasked, within 6 feet, or for more than 15 minutes, you're going to be considered a close contact. It is a mitigating, and I know mine keeps sliding down, and I keep pulling it up. Wearing masks is important because me wearing a mask protects you from me, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of the quarantine. What it will make a difference is those people not probably getting sick.
And that's really the most important, right? I mean, more than the quarantine, it's whether there's people actually at risk of actually acquiring the disease, right? We have different protocols, right? We have protocol if you're exposed for more than 15 minutes inside of 6 feet, it's not factoring in, it's probably protected by the mask, correct?
There is, right, it's not 100%, but it is important and it is protected, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of the quarantine. The health department and CDC do not make a difference, like, if you're within 6 feet for less than 15, or more than 15 minutes but you have a mask on, you're not considered close contact. It doesn't make a difference in terms of, strictly in terms of quarantine. Keeping the kids in the building, keeping the staff in the building. For actually somebody getting sick, it absolutely could make a difference. That's a great question. So, what do we do now? So, I have this great idea that maybe we would be able to extend out the 50% for a couple weeks so we could watch what happens in Xenia and Beaver Creek and Fairborn, who are going 100%. And so, you know, that would take 14 days. It would take 14 days if they had somebody infected in the building for that to kind of go through and see if anybody tested positive and how many kids ended up quarantined. I think Lebanon High School is already been an example, you know, where on day 1, I think they took out 40, maybe it was day 2, they took out 41 kids in quarantine for 2 kids that tested positive and like another 10 more on that 3rd day, back at 100%. And, but what I found out today is that those schools, the Xenia schools, some of the elementary schools in Beaver Creek and Fairborn, they have such a high percentage of their kids that chose the online option. Their 100% is not 100%. 100% is probably closer to maybe 65 in a couple of buildings, maybe closer to 70. So they still are able to provide some distance. I don't know if it's the 6 feet, and we're not going to have it. I think we're sitting at 79 to 80% if we go back, and our 6-foot bubble will be gone. So that is my presentation. So do you have any questions for me?
You said Xenia, who else?
Xenia, Fairborn, and Beaver Creek all returned, you know, I'll say 100%. All the kids that didn't choose the online option of that.
Right.
From what data was this derived as far as the seating distances inside? Is that study recent? Was it one from 3 months ago? Because obviously it's evolving rapidly throughout this. So.
The 6-foot social distancing mark has never changed. That's never wavered.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about, you know, inside of this 6 feet, well, I guess we're really not talking about necessarily the likelihood of sickness. We're just talking about the definition of whether you have to be quarantined or not.
Right.
That's really what we're talking about here.
That's exactly right. We're talking about keeping the most number of kids in school, and you can take on a lot of kids with one infected individual, depending on the building that you're in. Obviously, the high school, a lot more kids are going to end up quarantined simply because of the nature of the building. In the elementary school, it might just be those 10 kids in the classroom. But in terms of illness, we don't know. You know, we don't know how sick that one kid could get. We don't know how sick that staff member could get. And that's, you know, for me, I think sometimes we're looking so much at the close contacts about the quarantines and the isolation, we forget, you know, there still are kids that end up in ICU. There's still kids that have passed away from COVID. Not in Ohio yet, but we are just getting started. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Josh, want to go to the next slide there? You're good? Okay. All right, so just trying to summarize all the information from the previous slides, also in the anecdotal information. So we have a little plus and negatives for 100% on returning to 100% on September 8th. The survey results were about 60%, 62% of the parents that were surveyed are in favor of returning on September 8th. Kids are in school 5 days a week. There is that consistency, that every day, that daily piece of getting up, going to school, staying on top of things, and just that consistency piece of coming to school every day. And then working in tandem, obviously, with that, is that it's much easier to stay on pace academically if you are here every single day, rather than 50%. And then also there's childcare concerns. I mean, that is a real concern out there for folks, that there is childcare concerns. And that would be, again, yet another reason to return on September 8th. Kind of the negative, and Eileen was talking about this, is social distancing is really a big challenge. And that's probably the linchpin in the whole thing here, is with our classrooms, with our staff, we have the online option. 22% of our students chose the online option. So we are utilizing our own staff. About 15 or so of our staff members have been pulled out of the classroom, and they are now managing those online students. So even though we took 22% of our kids out, we also took 15 of our staff members out. So in some classes, it made the class a little smaller, but overall, throughout the whole school district, they have not dramatically reduced the class sizes, as if everybody was here 100%, and then those 15 teachers were in the classroom. So we still have classrooms of low 20s, mid 20s, and high 20s if we come back at 100%, especially at the elementary level at BCI. We have classrooms of 27, 28 kids in those classrooms. The lunchroom is also a big concern. You know, again, we try to socially distance in here. You add your other 50% in here, and it becomes even more challenging. You're probably adding at least one more chair to each table, 2 chairs to each table. So you have 4 kids at each table. So those are in overcrowding of the hallway. So those are obviously just some concerns with the social distancing piece. Quarantine spread will be higher, as Eileen was saying. So, you know, we had it's been great so far. As 7:32 and 5 seconds, we have 0 confirmed positive cases, students and or staff. Obviously, that could change at any moment. But again, I think that's, as I started out here, that's a team effort, everybody, parents and family and staff and everybody working together to try to minimize that to as close to 0. We're at 0 obviously right now, but do our best with that. But, you know, we do have some students and staff that are in quarantine because they have a spouse, they have a son or daughter or somebody that lives in their house that is positive, so they are quarantining. So if we do have more and more staff, if one person, as Eileen was saying, one person starts middle school, high school, that is test positive, those people around them will have to quarantine. It could be 40 to 50 kids at middle school or high school, depending on that class size. So if we have 4 or 5 positive cases, you're talking about 200 kids that would have to quarantine, and then the teachers would have to then teach their lessons in person to the kids that are in person, and then also work with that student, those students that are quarantined at home. Or if a staff member then is quarantined, that really presents a challenge as sub shortages. It's been a real thing in the past, and they're a heightened thing this year. Really, we have a sub shortage. It's not just us, this is everybody. But that is a real factor in this. We actually had a student that we thought was positive last week. It turned out to be negative, but we have this contact tracing spreadsheet that we do, and so we look at where that student was throughout the whole day, and how many students that student was in contact, how many staff or students was that student in contact with for within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes, and the answer was 0. So at school, can't control what's outside of school. So if that student would have been a positive, it would have been just that student quarantining and nobody else having to quarantine. So you're able to do that at the social distancing piece. Extending the 50% phase-in, kind of the opposite side of the parents there. The survey results for the staff is 85% want to continue the 50% phase-in. The social distancing could continue. much like it is now, that markers in the hallway, setups in the cafeteria, setups in the classroom, as people in the audience are seeing that if there's one student there, there's really no, in a lot of circumstances, not in every single circumstance, but in the vast, vast majority of circumstances, there's nobody within 6 feet of them for 15 minutes or longer. So that social distancing is much easier to do, and that quarantine spread would be much lower. Again, the negatives on that, the kids are only in school 2 to 3 days a week, even though they're doing remote learning lessons. That's not the same as being in school, so that's definitely a valid concern there. It's not the same thing. We are doing our best to stay on pace and keep those kids on track, but that definitely can be a challenge. Also, a challenge can be child care concerns that if we extend this, that folks had that September 8th date in their mind, and maybe they had something planned. I can get through a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, but then it becomes a real issue at that point with child care. And then obviously students may fall behind academically, also much tougher for interventions for students. If they're only in 2 or 3 days a week, much more challenging with that. Again, our goal should be not only to be in school, but to remain in school as long as possible. I know we have obviously schools around us that are 100% remote. And then obviously we have schools around us that are 100% back in this week. Like Alina mentioned, Xenia, Beaver-Creek, Lebanon, Butler is also back in this week, and a lot more come back next week. So, we go to the next slide. Big question mark there. So we're at the point where we have all this information, we have all this input. The current place that the board is at and the plan was at is September 8th is the goal of getting back in person 100%. I guess my preference, if I go that far, my preference is really to see how things go and try to extend 50% a little bit longer. Maybe it's a couple weeks, and just to see those schools that are coming back 100%, how are those things looking? Because sometimes it takes, obviously, 2 to 14 days for those symptoms to show up. And how are those schools doing with 100% back? Obviously, there's positives and negatives to that, and not extending all the way out to the end of the quarter, but just giving a couple more weeks just to, I think we have been extremely conservative, and I say that in a positive way, extremely conservative. Again, trying to look the long-term goal of let's stay in school. In my opinion, being in school is better than remote learning. In my opinion, there's just so many other, so many factors of going in person that can't be there for the online model. That being said, the online model can be successful, but being in person definitely has its benefits. So at this point, I would turn it over to the board and thoughts and concerns and ideas, and again, complex situation.
Board members, comment? Okay.
I definitely want to go back 100% in person. Parents were not, in July, I think it was, August, what they wanted, and our options were 100% in person or online. And that's not what they're getting. They're getting a hybrid method. And it's going to steal a quote from somebody at the really beginning I received. The hybrid method is actually just part-time education. Excuse me. Teachers have their hands full more than I can imagine, so they're having to teach in person and then plan for the other days. It's too much to ask. There's not consistency in it, in the sense some children have Chromebooks at home to do work, some have worksheets. A lot of us with kids on the off days really have no work. So our kids are getting 2 days a week this week. And that's not enough. If you keep that going longer and longer, just like our kids behind. 78% of us said we wanted in person. We still want in person. You can click the medical, the AAP, the VHS, CDC, all recommend kids go to school. We have done so well with hand washing and masks, and even with 78% of our students in, we can still social distance better than we were. Somebody else told me this, other people have told me this, even for our family. If the option is hybrid or online, we would have chosen online. Because I don't know what to do with childcare, and this is an issue for lots of parents. And there's the financial issue with childcare, so childcare doesn't really exist. And the child work at home, the stressors it's putting on the kids and the families is unbelievable, and the ripple effect is going to last for a very long time.
I agree with Karen. I think that we need to get kids back in school. I got 5 long, very good emails this week. And every single one was different. Every single one wanted a different combination of things. Some were talking about their kids in elementary, some in high school. I have worries for our staff, just like I have worries for the students. But I think, as far as school goes, the kids need to be with their colleagues, with the teachers. They're not getting, when they're doing the online work, they're not getting the help of their teachers that much. And I think they really do need to, they really need to have the help of the teachers, and they need to get to know the teachers so they can feel free to talk to them. They're not, they're only there part-time. They haven't had enough time in school to learn how to use their Chromebooks. My daughter-in-law teaches first grade, and I was asking her some things about how it's going. And she said, well, these first weeks we have to do worksheets because the kids don't know how to use the Chromebooks yet. And so that, that kind of jolted my mind because just sitting doing worksheets, that's not good for a first grader. And I can't imagine that kindergarten should be any different. And they're just, young kids need to have the consistency of getting used to going to school every day. So I guess that's kind of where I stand. I think the kids need to be in school as much as
The question Mr. Price asked is, are we to vote? And procedurally, we have a plan in place. So if there isn't a desire to change the plan, then we don't need a motion or vote. If there is an intention or a desire to change the plan, then we would need a motion and vote. Would you like to comment?
My observation would be, what has changed that would make us change our plan? Essentially nothing. We do not have any confirmed cases in the school. We had a plan that we came up with, and I can see no reason to change that at this point. reopening plan has been, we will adjust it based upon, what we see happening. Right now, we don't see anything happening. And so I think we need to be consistent with the message. There's no compelling reason to not do what we said we were going to do. And so my preference would be we adhere to the existing plan. We go back to 100% learning, in-person learning on the 8th of September.
Okay, first I want to say that I appreciate all the science people have brought to us. I too have gotten many emails here. Okay, I'll start again. Can you hear me now? I appreciate the science that everyone has brought to us. And I too have had many emails in the last 2 weeks. I want to say about science, what I found is everybody's science is different. No two people have the same science. Our nurse, who is commendable, did a lot of research. I like research. I'm a math person. I am into research. I've been researching every day too. A lot of the people that I think are really credible, some agree, some don't. They have studies to prove their point. We just don't know enough about it yet to say it's this or it's that. What we do know is we gave parents a choice. You can be online or you can be in the classroom. They chose, and we told them we would honor that. I don't want to be a liar and say, no, you can't have that, even though you chose it. The majority of our parents, the emails that I've received, and I think some of the others, want their kids in school full time. Habits are very, very important. The things I've read, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to form a habit. I don't like the habits that our kids are forming right now. The only way I think we could really tell was test scores. Those don't come until the end of the year. So we can see how effective we were. As a teacher, face-to-face learning is very, very, very important and strategic. They need to hear from their teachers. They need to know what's right and what's wrong. They need to be less frustrated. I don't get this, I have a worksheet. This is a big, big deal, all the stuff we're experiencing right now. But I think I'd like to keep it to this. We allowed our parents to choose, online or in person. They all chose. These people over here who chose in person, I don't think we can bait and switch them. I think we have to be honorable people and allow them.
We live in a world that is never entirely free of risk, and we choose to live according to the level of risk where we are comfortable, that is, when we can make a choice. Attending school isn't really a choice, but how we attend school can be a choice, particularly this year. 22% of our students chose an all online curriculum, and 78% chose to be in person 5 days a week, after an introductory hybrid period where protocols were implemented and practiced in anticipation of full attendance. Masks would be required full-time while at school, and social distancing options would be severely limited. When you look at the Greene County numbers, we've had 916 total cases of confirmed or presumed in Greene County since the inception of the pandemic here. There would have been 16 deaths, including about 900 people in that bit of we've gotten it. 702, according to the Greene County Public Health, are presumed recovered because they are no longer exhibiting symptoms and so forth, leaving 198 confirmed or presumed cases to be current right now in all of Greene County. So 198 in all of Greene County. But there are 161,600 residents in Greene County. So that translates to probably one or maybe two persons in our student and staff population total. If you combine these low numbers with the precautions which the school has put in place, masks, hand washing and sanitizing, monitoring temperatures, surface disinfections, and implementing social distancing as much as possible, there is a low risk to our students and staff. It is not the same as no risk, but no risk is not possible. This is not to say we throw caution to the wind. I absolutely endorse the strong precautions established by the district under the guidance of the Greene County Public Health Department. I think the staff should be particularly vigilant to ensure that others around them follow the protocols. And I think that that's what's happening in our district, which is great. But I think that the risk is sufficiently mitigated so that would allow us to go back to the classroom full time, barring no dramatic change in infection rates in our region. So I would support the plan that we've established. Anybody else want to comment? Yeah. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate making sure that we have the information to review this again. This obviously is not an easy decision to make or an easy solution to come up with because there are so many different perspectives, so many different ways of achieving education in school. I think our staff and administration have done a yeoman's job so far, and I congratulate them for that. It's the beginning of a long road for this year, and we want to support them as much as we possibly can.
Dave, I have one additional comment.
Sure.
Very good.
Just one additional comment. This anecdotal information that I've gotten is that some of our students have kind of followed the examples of some of the parents and other people you see that they kind of use their mask as not necessarily the chin guard, but the nose isn't covered. So it needs to be mouth and nose. And I would ask that teachers, administration, people throughout adult supervision throughout our schools would remind our students and our staff that mask is to be above, of course, the mouth and above the nose as well. Oh, one other thing that's important. It gave me pause whenever I looked at survey results from teachers. And please understand, it's a balancing act here between what we have mapped out a plan to do, as Jimmy said, honoring what we've said we would do, especially in light of the fact we don't have any data to send us down a different path at this point. So it's not to be disregarding on our part of the teachers. Again, that's why it became something to consider and gave me pause when I saw the number of staff and teachers that indicated their preference to continue the hybrid model. So again, that's not lost on us. We certainly are mindful of that, but again, to be consistent with our word, to honor what we've told the parents when they made the decision between online and in person, and then ultimately we have no data to send us down a different path. That's why, for myself at least, I'm committed to doing what our plan is we detailed, and I think that's a factor, as we heard in all the other board members' positions.
Throughout this whole process, it's been a team effort, everybody working together, and it'll be a team effort to make it happen for September 8th. So,
Thank you very much.
yep. Kevin, you want to go? Kevin, right, or Kevin Lang? Where is it?
Okay. Josh, you have the bullet points up there for the levy. Okay, switching gears to the levy, just some information here, and a few comments. I don't know how to do this other than to read a lot of this stuff to you, so I apologize, but we have a 5.7 mil operating levy on the November 3rd ballot. This levy will raise $3.3 million per year approximately for the district. The district last passed the levy in 2015, and I've been asked before, if this levy passes, what will you do with the money? Unfortunately, the answer is that we are in dire straits financially. The levy will help us, stay where we are and maintain the district and some day-to-day operations, things like that. We're not doing some major purchase with the levy money. To pass, the levy would cost, as it did last time, $199.50 for $100,000 appraised market value of a property per year. And then these are some important points to note that you might not have heard before, but we didn't know until about May 1st, when it was dropped on us from the state, that we were going to receive a $657,000 funding cut due to their losses from COVID. And then, as the state does a lot of times, not much was said, and we went into a new fiscal year, July 1st, and they just left our funding at that same level. So if you get my drift, they cut $657,000 from the 1920 school year funding and did nothing but leave it there, which is a cut for what we were expecting for 2021. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. They even hinted they might still be changing this fiscal year's funding, which makes it a lot of fun to budget. So anyway, in a situation where we needed a levy to begin with, it's now important, especially with this cut that we received. One of my favorite, my most interesting lines that I've read from our performance audit, when the state came in and audited our district for efficiencies, they made a statement that tax effort among our residents is below the state average and local peer average. So what that means is tax effort is the wealth of our community compared to the taxes that they pay. So you could have a community paying less taxes than us, but they have a greater tax effort because their income per average resident is lower than ours. I believe we're in the top 10% of the state. So that was from the Ohio Performance Audit. And I want to shift gears now, unless there are any questions about anything right there that I just covered. Let's shift gears to the updated 5-year forecast. I don't know if you've got that one. Josh, you got it? Get the summary, 4 or 5 lines, rows. You got that? You got it?
I got the full spreadsheet.
Okay. Well, I just have the summary here in front of me, but anyway, we are required to file this forecast in May and November each year. And we normally don't update it in the middle of that time much, other than just for operational use. But with the levy on the ballot and the changes that are due to the COVID and the online learning and that kind of thing, there have been some major changes to the forecast numbers. So I did an updated draft forecast. It's now, Josh has put on our district website, so I don't have one pass out or anything tonight, but I just want to quote some numbers to you. But before I do that, I want to give you a little information. This forecast is made assuming no levy passes for the 5 years, and assuming that all the $4.8 million in cuts that we've already made stay in place all 5 years. So, I mean, maybe we're hoping that both of those don't happen, but I can't do a forecast based on anything else until I get information. So we did that, and then some things to think about. Our balance on June 30th was higher than we thought it was going to be because we saved more money by not being in school for a couple months. However, there are some delayed expenditures from that, such as unemployment costs to the district. We had many people filed unemployment during that time. The ones that didn't get no longer paid, and we haven't been billed for all that money. Also, we get reimbursed from the state for a decent portion of our transportation costs. And although we saved money by not transporting students the last 2 months, made our balance look bigger June 30th, now we're in the year where we get reimbursed from the state based on that transportation. And because we spent less, we'll get reimbursed a lot less. So we'll have less income than projected at that point for transportation reimbursement. Again, I mentioned that we don't know what state funding is going to be the next 4 or 5 years of the forecast. And, a year ago, we got a 24% increase in medical insurance premiums. So hopefully that won't happen again. That was a real shock too. So things like that can happen that will really set this off. I just wanted to state that at the end of this year, which will be June 30th, 2021, we are estimating a $4.1 million general fund carryover. That's about where this district should be for a carryover based on about a 12-13% of your budget that they recommend. Then fiscal year 23, which would be 2 years from that point, we are already in the red in the general fund by an estimated $26,000. And then 2 years from that, fiscal year 25, we are 8.1 million in the red. Operating as we are right now, with the expenditures and revenues we have right now, estimating that the increases in those that normally happen year to year, with no levy and with not bringing back any of the cuts that we made, that's where we look right now. And those are the numbers we're going to use in the promotion and information that goes out about the levy, and it's on the website too. Then the last thing that I want to review for you is the next slide. It's the one that has the different entities, about 9 of them, and their tax burden. Okay, good. This is interesting too. Next time somebody tells you, I'm not saying they aren't high, but next time someone mentions in the community how high their taxes are, just think about this for a while though. We're the lowest of all these entities, whether you live in Sugarcreek Township or Bellbrook City. If you take into consideration that we have no school district income tax and we have no city tax, and the listing here for real estate taxes isn't all going to the school. The school gets about 60 or 65% of that. But, fire, police, and parks, and library, all that is figured into that amount. So your real estate tax, the numbers here are based on a $50,000 income and a $100,000 home, which aren't realistic, but you can do the calculation based on those. And you can see that when you take all those into consideration, Beaver Creek City, Fairborn City, Xenia City, All Springs Village, Centerville City, Kettering City, and Oakwood City all pay more taxes than we do in that respect. And I think the thing in our district, though, that comes into play is that even though we don't have the city tax or the school district income tax, our property values are very high. So, you don't really you probably have a more valuable house than you do in one of these other districts. But per $100,000 calculation, and taking into consideration no income tax, we are the lowest among all these entities. I think that's all I have.
Next slide. All right. District has made or saved $4.8 million in 4 phases of budget reductions from 2018 to 22. And again, I'm not going to go through the normal thing I normally go through every meeting of all of our reductions, because it is quite lengthy. However, we're going to hit some highlights here. All staff is on a pay freeze for 2021, this school year. No steps. Everybody is on a pay freeze. That's support staff, that's administrators, that's teachers, that's nurses, that's everybody is on a pay freeze for this year. Also, all staff took a reduction in insurance benefits starting last school year. We've had it's 11% reduction, not 10%, 11% reduction in teaching staff positions since 2018. So we reduced our staff by 33 staff members, and 17 of those are certified, which are teachers. Our per pupil spending is $530 less than similar districts, and about $1,121 less than the state average. That's in the district profile report, the CUP report. We have 17 less teachers compared to our peer districts. Again, that is in the Ohio Performance Audit. I don't know if you can see that. That was done in January. Ohio Auditor's Office came in and did an audit, performance audit on us. Zero cost to the school district. This is on the website. This is on the auditor's website. We have 17 less teachers compared to our peer district. We have 7 less administrators than similar districts and state average per the district profile report, the CUP report. We found on ODE's website. School staff is paid less over their careers compared to local peer districts. So if you look at the whole life of somebody who's teaching here in Bellbrook, they're going to make less than all of our local peer districts around us. So just because we have a veteran staff, that's a one moment in time. Over the whole salary schedule, our teachers, and that was last year, it's even more so this year since everybody's on pay freeze. 44% of our buses need to be replaced. 44%. So what that means, and that's in the Ohio Performance Report, 12 years or older or 150,000 miles. 44% of our buses meet that criteria. We have a fantastic mechanic to keep those buses running, but you can only do so much for so long. 90% of our student and staff computers are in their 4th year of life or older. And we have 2 more years to replace those because part of our budget reductions, we pushed that off another year. So, again, if you think of, well, at home, I got a 5, 6-year-old computer, it's doing okay. You aren't a teenager or a young child with a computer. Secondly, you aren't transporting that home, school, sporting event, thrown somewhere, so it gets a lot, even though we buy more rugged editions, it's not a home edition, it is a more rugged edition of a Chromebook, it does get more wear and tear. So 90% of our, to me it's astonishing, 90% of our student staff computers are their 4th year or older, and they get the last 2 more years for our student computers. Our facilities expenditures per square foot is 13.5% less than our peer districts. So we're spending 13% less on keeping our facilities up and running. So that just set the stage again on the reason why we're on the ballot in November. Those are the things right there. And that list, unfortunately, continues to grow, and those numbers continue to get bigger. So again, as we're looking towards the levy in November, one of the things that we wanted input on is if the levy is passed, what are past reductions in phase 4? We've got 4 phases of reductions. And to be honest with you, we probably did too good of a job in the first 3 reductions and really kept it out of the classroom as much as possible. When I say we did too good of a job, it wasn't really felt. Staff, we did it on purpose, or students, we did it on purpose. We wanted to do as many cuts and reductions as possible to keep it as far away from the classroom as possible, because obviously that's the most important expenditure in the classroom. So the first phase, 3 phases cut, we really tried to do that as much as possible, have the least amount of impact. Phase 4 reductions, we were in a place we just couldn't do that anymore. And so we wanted some input, so we did another survey this past week. What are some things, if we're able to, as we're providing input, if we're able to, what are some things that phase 4 reductions that you would possibly want to bring back? So this is all parents, this first survey. We have a pie chart here. I said it right this time. We have a pie chart, Josh, for all parents. Okay. Being restored. So the biggest thing here was K-5 STEM, and then K-5, 85 supplementals, and the high school busing. So overall, those are the 3 biggest pieces there that folks wanted, and then the K-5R was right behind that. So the next slide, we looked at those on a building level. And look at those on a building level. And so, as you can probably see, again, this is the highest priority. So in the survey, there was highest priority, second highest priority, and third highest priority. That's the questions we asked. If possible, what are some things we want to bring back? So obviously, at the building, at the Steve Bell BCI, they wanted STEM, art, and the 85 supplemental brought back. And then the middle school and high school, they wanted high school busing, K-5 STEM, and the 85 supplementals brought back. And then if you move on to the next slide, the second highest priority being restored. Art is the number one and the second priority, and then K-5 supplementals, and then K-5 STEM and the 85 supplementals are the top choices there, with high school busing fourth for the second highest priority. So again, as you're go to the next slide, looking at it from a building level. Steve Bell BCI, their second highest was K-5 art, STEM, and 85 supplementals. The middle school and high school, K-5 STEM, high school busing, and 85 supplementals. Going on to the next question. Next question in the survey: if the levy does not pass in November, the board would like input on additional reductions the board might consider. So again, we gave them options of increasing sports participation fees, reducing specials classes or electives at the K-5 level, 6 to 12 level, and then increasing class size at the K-5 level, and then the 6 to 12 level. So the levy does not pass. Additional reductions would be fees had over half there, then increasing class size of 6 to 12 and reducing specials K to 5. And then moving on, the levy does not pass. What are some things the board should not consider? So increasing class sizes K to 5, reducing electives 6 to 12, and increasing class sizes 6 to 12. So I guess we're at the point of, as we're looking at an updated 5-year forecast that Mr. Lyman was talking about, where at the end of this fiscal year, we're $4.1 million in the black. Next fiscal year, we're $2.7 million in the black. And then FY23, we're in the red by about $26,000. Again, huge impact on this budget has really been those reductions that we have made. It's made huge impact on the budget. So I guess we're at the part of the conversation of, if it does pass, is there anything we want to bring back? And what are some timelines for that? And if it does not pass, what are some things that, if we think we need to additional cuts? Or do we just say, for right now, this is the new normal. We just continue on with our reductions, and there's no additional reductions. So, thoughts or comments?
When we look at the item going to the highest priority of being restored, the two that really stick out are, of course, the K-5 STEM. It was actually a dominant one at Stephen Bell Creek, and even at Bellbrook Middle School, even though it wasn't, didn't impact those students directly. The 85 supplementals hit on the middle and high school. I think especially with all the clubs and other extra co-curricular types of activity that go on there. Um, I would certainly say, I'd like to see both of those return. Anybody else?
At our last meeting, Jessica that said people were going to email us with their suggestions and ideas. And so we did get those, and I think it's important to know these are the ones we're talking about, but there's other programs or projects that can be considered. If somebody had emailed me, which I forwarded to you, after that about reading club or typing, but these aren't the only ones we're considering.
Yeah, just comment on the reading club. It's been probably, so what that is, it's extra reading intervention help at Stephenville BCI. So right now we have two reading teachers at Stephenville and one at BCI. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had 2 reading teachers at BCI. I believe maybe 3 at Stephenville. Yes. So that's before I came. That's probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yep. But they have been reduced in the recent years. Yes.
I think that as long as we ask the parents what they think is important, we need to go with their responses as much as possible. I agree with Kate twice again, because I'm a math person too, I've helped out for a number of years. But at this point, it's with the schedules and buildings, it's hard to add in a STEM class. But I think that's something we should consider. And definitely the supplementals, because that will give, those will make a lot of kids. And that can be picked up second semester or whatever for those activities. I don't know what the situation is with Hell's working with the high school, having no busing, because I haven't been up here when they're arriving and everything. That might be something to consider if, for the safety of the students, because running the school isn't all that great. And those are the major ones, because everything else I think would be a little difficult to add. The art class would be just the same as STEM. It'd be hard to put it into the schedule at this point. So I think we should take the parents' feedback into the highest consideration.
So just to clarify a few things, so, you guys both touched on it. Bringing back a teaching position in the middle of the year would be extremely challenging of just scheduling and so forth. I think we're already on like our 15th schedule at our building just because of all the continuing changes. So those would be challenging to do in the middle of the year, and you were already alluding to that. The supplementals, definitely could bring that back ASAP, whatever remaining supplementals in the year. The high school busing, it could be troublesome bringing that back in the middle of the year just because we would have to redo all of our routes. Right now, Dave, it's different. With 50%, it's really hard to see how the traffic is in the flow just because there's only 38% of our high schoolers there every day. So it's really challenging to gauge what impact that is having. Because traffic out there is pretty good. Again, we only have 38% of our kids that are either on the bus or being transported. So you really don't get a full feel of what it really is going to look like. I just want to clarify a few of those things.
Yeah, I meant to mention that earlier too when I was talking about STEM. Is library considered one of these other categories? Because with,
Media specialist?
is that under media specialist?
Media
Okay.
specialist.
I'm not sure that the people would have, I know I wouldn't have made that assumption. Yeah, so, but, having just a half-time person in the library.
Yeah, we went from 4 to 2. We have a half-time person in each of our 4 buildings, so splitting time between each of the buildings.
Right.
Yes.
That would be something I would hope that would be feasible in a mid-school year decision.
Well, some of us won't want to hear this, but this is what the parents said. And yeah, it's challenging to get those things back in, but COVID's challenging too. I look at this and think what a huge encouragement to get at least one of those things back in, even mid-year, to our students and to their parents. We serve families and we serve students. That's what we do here. We're in the business of people. If that's what they want, we should try as much as possible to make that happen and make 16 schedule changes and try to get it done.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Thank you both very, very much.
I guess I just need some further clarification. As we're talking about the levy going forward, as we are presenting information to our parents and community members, I think they need to know if the levy is passed, what are the things that we are bringing back and when. So if we want to bring stuff back in the middle of the year, or next year, we need to make those decisions by sooner rather than later, just because of early voting is October, and so it's late August, so that time frame of getting that information out to folks is shrinking really fast. And so any type of guidance or information would be extremely helpful on, about this meeting or September 10th is our next meeting. We're just running up against crunch time.
Sure.
People are going to be voting by absentee ballot, and they're going to be early voting at unprecedented numbers. So that getting that information out to folks is no longer get it out by November 3rd. It's get it out by October 5th.
Right.
Yeah.
So based on the feedback that you've gotten, and then for comments coming in, can you provide a recommendation for our next board meeting? Was that soon enough for us to be able to make a final decision, or would you like something more concrete this evening?
We can do something concrete this evening, that would be fine, but if the board chooses to wait till September 10th,
It's a risk of waiting.
then we can wait. It just is that crunch time is just,
Sure.
It's crunch time out there.
Sure.
So
I think
what the board would like to do.
based on feedback, I think the supplementals are for sure an item that could come back mid-year, and it was number 2 on the list.
Yep.
I think we'd like to find, if we could, get the K-5 STEM figured out as an opportunity. That I know I recognize that it would be difficult, but if it's not mid-year, then it certainly ought to be on the next school year for sure. Other board members, what are your perspectives on that?
Let's try it mid-year.
If we can get it, seminar,
Also, the librarian, we clarified that I think media specialist didn't resonate with people very
I would agree, so that would be librarian, if we could have a librarian back for the year. Okay.
Great.
I think, if you couldn't hear Karen, she said, I think my kids would rather have STEM than lunch. Is that accurate? Okay.
Would it be, I don't know if, it's easy just to list everything on there. So we need to probably, get a list and maybe work the forecast and see how that's going to affect our numbers. Because on the other hand, we want to bring stuff back. I mean, if we eat up a good portion of the money that's coming in from past levy by bringing back a bunch of cuts, the cost, they're costly. Just need to look at the number, get some what's that.
Let's see what we can do with those three.
Yeah, Mrs. Hoffman said, let's see what we can do with those three.
It's supplemental media specialists and K-5 STEM, those three?
Yep.
Okay. Mid-year?
Three more again, like, by STEM, supplemental, and librarian.
Library.
Okay.
About buses as well.
For the high school busing? Do we
I
know?
think last I heard, we weren't sure we needed to do that because it's hard to find bus drivers. Is it 4 or 5 extra we have to have?
For
Yeah, it's, starts mid-year.
something I'll explore and look into. Yeah, that's the challenge of that. We have, one sub right now. So, again, it might be different if it's a full-time, full-time, bus drivers aren't full-time, but a steady everyday job might be a difference maker too, folks. Okay. And then, so what you're saying is for this year, supplementals, librarians, K-5 STEM, high school busing. Bring back. Okay. And then any additional for next year, or is that the new, that what you're saying right there?
I think K to 5 aren't for next year.
Okay.
With that, a nice,
We need to see how the
okay,
costs
true. Mary's comment was that we need to make sure that we can manage that with the budget, particularly to keep us solvent in the budget forecast.
Because unfortunately, everything we do in regard to bringing back the cuts is going to affect down the road when we have to go for our next levy. Hopefully, way down the road. But, anything we bring back, especially if it's a personnel decision, it could be as much as $500,000, figuring, for instance, everything else. They're one of the top experienced teachers with a Master's Plus on that thing over a 5-year forecast period.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if we cut 1.1, if we have budgeted $1.1 million of cuts for the next 5 years, bring back half of that, and, instead of $5 million of reduction, you're only getting $2.5 million of reduction. So, yeah, the cumulative effect.
That's,
Okay.
any other comments?
That's if it passed. What about any discussion on if it does not pass?
I think it was pretty clear that EV sports and participation fees was the dominant choice at what, 53%.
It's a part of the performance audit that the auditor's office did. They compared us to our primary care districts and they compared us to the state average we were about $105,000 over our primary peer average. Through the additional raising of fees this year, we made up about $95,000 of that. So we're about $10,000 less, or we spent $10,000 more than our primary peer in regards to extracurriculars and athletics. So, we could maybe either hold where we're at or a very small increase to try to get close to that primary peer average. Again, it all depends on how many athletes you have and how many supplementals we're paying and so forth.
Is it something that do we have to make further reductions based on the current? That was just going in red.
We would have to look at that. It would depend on, I have to look at that. I'm sure it is that right now. I don't think we have to make huge reductions, but part of it would depend on some factors that I don't know right now, like I mentioned before, unemployment in different fields. But we would not have to make gigantic cut like we made the last 3 years, every year.
Yeah, so if you look at the updated 5-year forecast, we're $4.1 million in the black at the end of this fiscal year. Again, high performance auditors, they suggest about 10% reserve. Don't go below that. That's about $3 billion. In FY22, next school year, not this school year, next school year, we'll be $2.7 million in the black. So we'll be right below that recommended amount. But as I'm looking at this forecast, I would hate to make dramatic cuts based on this information. I would probably go the direction of looking at, is there things that we can do through attrition and continue to look for other efficiencies and so forth. If it doesn't pass, and then at some point, put another levy on the ballot, and then looking at things if it doesn't pass at that point. But I'm open to the thoughts for that.
When we talk about what our balance is going to be as of a certain period of time, we need to keep in mind that if we're going to put a levy on to alleviate the deficit, that when I say $3.3 million a year that we collect that over a calendar year, January 1st to December 31st. You have to pass a levy in the calendar year before that. So if we pass one in May or November, for instance, of 21, we wouldn't get the $3.3 million until December 31st, or toward the end of 2022. So you can't obviously wait until you're going to be in the red to try and do something about it with a levy. It really needs to be 2 years before that.
And based on some of the experience we've had this year, certainly with the budget cuts from the state, having the 10% reserve is very prudent for us to make sure we do that. All right, any other board comments? Dr. Kozan and Mr. Levy, thank you so very much for the work that you've done on this and sharing this information with us this evening, helping us get through some of these good decisions.
So just so I'm clear here, I'm sorry. So it does not pass. What we're saying is possibly looking at raising participation fees a little bit, but not making any other reductions except maybe through attrition or other cost saving measures. That I don't want to put words in people's mouth. I'm just trying to.
That would be how I would understand it, or is that Dave's nodding, Karen's nodding? Yes.
Okay. All right.
There are requests on the supplementals when we come back. If we can be more specific about what those supplementals are made up of. Right now, it's just kind of like a broad term. But if we can be very specific, like model UN, newspaper, junior ROTC, be very specific so people go, oh, rather than just some blank thing, they don't know whether it affects them or not, or it affects their interest in the children.
Great point. Great point.
You do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, going on to open communication. We have two folks who have signed up for our open communication. First is Mike Kinsey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm here this evening to give a report as to what our first day of school looked like. But before I do that, I want to throw out just a couple facts just to give a little bit of context and the lay of the land for conversation here tonight. The first is that Lieutenant Governor John Husted, and talking about antibody testing, he estimates that over 246,000 people in the state of Ohio have contracted COVID-19. And from that, the Honorable Nurse answered also, she agrees here that 0 children have died from COVID-19. A second fact I'd like to put forth is that there's a large body of science out there. I brought a study tonight that's published in the American Academy of Pediatrics just this last month, and it looked at a whole host of studies, many of which coming from Europe. We certainly can learn a lot from them. They're preceding us, and they've come to a conclusion that children, especially the younger children, do not transmit COVID-19 to other children or to adults. I know I only have 3 minutes. I'd love to go into it, but a fantastic study, so I'm going to move on. So just kind of with that context, I want to report what our first day of school looked like. Many parents know the overarching large policies, but some of the smaller in the weeds policies, or maybe better described as the culture of the classroom, we were a little bit surprised by. For example, in talking to other families around us, students were discouraged from drinking water from their own water bottles, because in order to do that, they would have to lower their masks. Our son came home from the first day only drinking about 4 ounces of water, we estimate, because we know what was in his water cup. There are mask breaks provided. We appreciate that. Some folks don't know the mask breaks that for some of the students are outside, sitting in the grass, you're spread out 6 to 10 feet apart. However, the students are instructed not to speak to each other, not to talk with their peers. At recess at BCI, at least for the first week, the students were not allowed to play on playground equipment or spend any time with their peers. Instead, they were masked, socially distanced, and just able to take a lap around the playground. So my question to you, and it's not a rhetorical question, it's a respectful question, is what is the board doing to ensure for the mental health of our students, especially our younger students? We talked a lot, even tonight, about physical health and educational health. I've not seen any communication yet as to the mental health of our students and what psychologists are saying that these long-term effects of a culture such as this could be, especially given the very low risk of physical health. We know that adults, we've seen a huge increase in suicide attempts, depression, and alcoholism, and I think it would be naive to think that students won't be affected also. And last thing, and I'll kind of close with this, and this is of lesser importance to me, but I'm not here to complain. I'm honestly here to help, and I'm just not certain if the board is aware. I was a little bit surprised or maybe alarmed in talking with other families around us that we support the levy. We voted for the levies in the past, many of our friends have. Many families are concerned as they're now learning what the culture is and the educational environment, that they're saying that they maybe will no longer support the levy going forward if this is the new normal, as Dr. Kozan has said a few times. And in addition to that, as families are now learning what the educational environment is, as families may choose to pull out and pursue other options, homeschooling or private school, we're concerned about the financial future of Bellbrook schools. We love Bellbrook. We love our Bellbrook schools. It's only been 4 days in person, but man, our kids love their Bellbrook teachers. And we just want to give you this information, and I look forward to any response that you have, whether it's now or in the near future, about the mental health of our children. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
What grade?
I'm sorry?
What grade?
We have 2 children in grade 3 and grade 1. 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. and Mark Carrera.
Hello, I'm Mark Carrera. For those of you that don't know me yet, I'm used to protecting my voice. It sounds like it's pretty good. Anyways, teaching here at Bellbrook High School Board. This is my 22nd year. This is the 4th year that I am serving as the SEA president. And I came up here, really going to talk about my and our view about the return to school plan, but it seems like you've already made up your minds with that. So the first thing I want to do is extend an invitation to you for September 8th to come into my classroom, because I have an average of 25 students per period who are adults. I teach 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. There will be no physical distancing. I think everyone that's listening to this needs to know that with the plan of 100% return, 100% distance is out the window. It's just not going to happen. It will not be possible. I was barely, to go into it just a little bit, I've been sitting over here stewing for a little while because I was I'm going to tell you, I was insulted by the dismissiveness of the board towards the attitudes of the teachers. It went all the way through twice, really, before Mr. Price kind of threw the bone to, 85%. And I do respect the fact that you guys have voted and you're in very tough positions. But, Mr. Price made the point of what data has come out. I would say that teachers are professionals. We should be respected in terms of what we think is most appropriate for the setting. 85% of the staff members voted in one direction. You have simply disregarded that. I find that to be terribly inappropriate, especially since over the last 2 years, the SEA has agreed to 5 MOUs, 4 of which have saved the district money. I was shocked to just hear nothing about teacher health, nothing. None of you said a word about that. None of you said the dangers that teachers are facing in this, and I'm not even talking about myself. I only came up here this time because I had numerous teachers reach out to me. The SEA actually has the opportunity to speak directly to the board. We never have done that, so I decided to do it like this instead. But, a couple of things that I just wrote down: sacrifices, physical distance. If we're thinking about putting stuff back, why don't we give some teacher payback? Since you're looking at putting things back towards if the levy passes. Why not, right? We took the sacrifice. I would say that that's part of it. I would say, Mr. Carpenter, not to be disrespectful, but you brought up Greene County and how many cases are in Greene County. We are right. How many staff members work or live in Montgomery County? We are not on the far side of Greene County. Montgomery County is like 2 miles in that direction. And I'm not in favor of putting off coming back 100%. You were absolutely right, ladies. My job would be so much easier if we had 100% of the students in class. I have been busting my tail, legitimately trying to teach kids outside of school and inside school at the same time. But I just really wanted to express that, and I do, like I said, open invitation. September 8th, 6th period, 26 kids. I hope to see any of you there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I don't think any of us really do discount the sacrifices the teachers have made, because we know that they have been very expensive. I'm very sorry that you feel that way. That certainly is not been intended. Okay, finally, we have board policy revision. Recommending approval for the revision of board policy 3220, standard-based teacher evaluation. It's something we had our first read on in our last board meeting. Do we have a motion to approve that policy? Mrs. Long? Mrs. France? Any questions or comments on board policy we didn't get answered the last time?
No.
Okay, I just have one question. We have SEA representatives if you would, us to, if you determine that policy.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
We're working with them, and meeting with them, with another meeting next week. So, yeah.
That's, I just wanted to.
Yes. No. So for our contract, we have a teacher evaluation committee. It's made up of four teachers and four administrators. So we've been working together on this. And the board policy just reflects those things that we have been working on and implementing through that teacher evaluation committee. So,
Any other questions, comments? All right, Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, is there any other business to come before the board, comments from board members? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. France? Second, Mrs. Long? Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes. Motion passes, we are adjourned.